When I moved from Houston to South Carolina a while ago, I've lost track of the years now, 7 or 8 years ago, there was a question that we got asked a bunch. This question was never asked when I moved to Houston the first time, when I moved to D.C., when I moved back to Houston, when I moved back here. This has never been asked except in South Carolina. They would say, "Who are your people?" Right? And I had to learn what that meant. I was like, do you mean like Ford and Walker and these people? Like, no, like they say, who are your people? They want to know who your grandma and grandpa are. They want to know who your great-grandma and great-grandpa are. Because in South Carolina, people have lived there a long time, right? There are very old things in South Carolina. And so when they ask this question, they don't just want to know, like, what team do you cheer for? They don't just want to know those kind of things. They want to know, like, are you one of us? Or are you someone who's just moved here? Like if you just moved here 2 generations ago, like if your parents just moved to South Carolina, you're not yet a South Carolinian. And if you're the one that moved to South Carolina, you're certainly not one. They want to know, how far back do you go? Is your great-granddaddy buried behind the church? That's the kind of question they're asking because it's really important for all of us, right? Who are our people? We ask that question. Right? School just started. If your teen's like mine, as soon as they got their schedule, they texted their buddies, say, which lunch do you have? Right? Walker has D-lunch, and none of his friends do, and we've been through all that. It's a whole deal. He wants to know, where are his people? Right? Because I think, in a sense, that also helps us know who we are. Because if we're honest, like, we find our identity not just sometimes in ourselves, but we find our identity in who our people are. It's not just teenagers that do this, right? We're starting up the Elderberries, which is a wonderful name for a retiree ministry. These are folks, if you want to talk to someone struggling with who am I and who are my people, find someone who turned in their keys and left the office for the last time. Because they've always been an accountant, or they've always been a teacher. And now they wake up and what do I do? They need to know who their people are. They need to know what's my identity. So we all do it. This may be a strange way to start off a sermon about a healing miracle. But I think the real good news of today's story and the gospel isn't just the healing. It's about what this woman found out about her people and herself. So we'll get to that part in a minute. But we will talk about the healing. And it's a difficult thing to stand up and preach about a healing because we've all prayed for someone to be healed. And sometimes that person is healed in the way we want. Sometimes that person's not in the way we want. And then we read these stories and we're like, well, if it could happen for that woman, did I not pray hard enough? Did I not do enough? So it's really hard to talk about these things. But I think there's a hint in this gospel we'll get to in a minute that shows us that sometimes when we read it that way, we're missing a little bit of a point. So let's set up this story, right? We're in Luke chapter 13. We've been working through Luke. If you've been paying attention this year as we've worked through our gospel, you'll understand Luke has an overwhelming need to tell us about how Jesus reached out to the least and the last and the lost. All the stories. He's reaching out to the people who are considered unclean. He's reaching out to the people who are considered unwelcome. He's reaching out to the people that frankly aren't even considered at all. And then we come to this story. Jesus is standing up teaching in a synagogue, and he's very much like I am now talking to you, and it's as if someone is trying to sneak in the back. Hopefully no one's sneaking in now, otherwise it's a great object lesson. But someone walks in, and Jesus sees her. That's the first miracle in this story. Because it says this woman's been bent over for 18 years. So she's like this. She probably can't work. She probably doesn't live on her own. She probably has very little to her name. And she probably just sneaks around walking like this. And if you can't see someone's face, do you actually see them? And so this woman's probably spent nearly 2 decades being overlooked. So the first thing we hear from this story is that Jesus is the one who sees her. We have plenty of stories where someone comes up to Jesus and said, Jesus, heal me. They make themselves known. They pray out loud. They beg. They whatever. That doesn't happen here because this woman's maybe used to being overlooked and forgotten. But Jesus sees her. The next thing Jesus says is, woman, you are released from your bondage. The language here is intentional. The language Jesus is using is the same language that's used when you untie a work animal or when you break prison chains. It's language of freedom and release. Jesus is telling this woman, whatever it is that for 18 years has kept her cooped up, that's been let go. Whatever it is for 18 years that's kept her burdened has been released. And he touches her. Again, this isn't just a detail about, oh, Jesus is trying to be close. No, Jesus is touching a sick person. Jesus is reaching out and doing the things that makes him unclean. This woman stands up, immediately begins praising. And so that's the healing, such as it were. But let's talk about the outcome of that. Let's talk about what this woman finds in the healing. So picture this scene. This woman has spent 2 decades walking around like this. She's been bound by Satan. We don't know what it is, actually. The scripture's not clear on that. And so she's walking around like this. She can see her feet. She can maybe see the people in the first pews. If, like me, the rest of you are above my glasses line, she can't see you. And so she's out of luck. And she can maybe hear you, but she maybe doesn't know what you look like. She doesn't know who's on her sides or any of that. She feels isolated. She feels alone. And then she's told to stand up. I don't think it's a coincidence that she's in the gathering place of the people of God when she stands up. It says, immediately she began praising God. That's what the people in this gathering place of the people of God were doing. So immediately she didn't just start yelling out on her own. I don't imagine. I think the gospel hints at the fact that this woman who has been bound up and isolated stands up and immediately joins the community in their praise. She immediately sees who her people are. She immediately remembers she's not alone. She immediately remembers she's part of a community. And then she's reminded of who she is. Because we have these interactions, and we'll talk about the synagogue leader. Don't ever trust a church leader. But after that, Jesus goes on to say, he's talking about, don't you untie your animals and you free them on the Sabbath. How about this woman, this daughter of Abraham? This isn't just a throwaway line either. This is the only time in the Gospels in which a woman is identified as a member of the covenant community. This is the only time that a woman is identified as an heir of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. This woman is reminded that she's more than whatever bound her up. This woman is reminded that she's more than her illness. This woman is reminded that she's more than her burdens. Because we are not identified by the things that are wrong with us. That woman was identified as the daughter of Abraham. We, in our language, might say that woman is identified as a child of God. So this woman who stood up and looks around and sees that she's part of a community, she knows who her people are. And then she's reminded of who she is. A a child of God. But we've got to talk about this religious leader. So this is someone who stands up, and he's really frustrated, right? Probably because the whole service got disrupted. And, I don't want you people standing up and causing a scene either. He stands up, and at this point, he's yelling at everybody, it says. He yells to all the gathered and say, don't you know there's so many other days? Every other day of the week, you can come do this. But on this day, we have to follow these rules because we have to do this because this is how we've always done it. That's the Episcopal translation of this Bible verse. I have a vestry meeting right after this, and so they'll probably throw this at me. No. This person stands up. They're like, no, this is not how it's done, Jesus. This is not how it's done, woman. This is not how it's done, gathered faithful in the synagogue. If you heard my sermon last week, you might hear echoes because this religious leader is someone who benefited from the status quo. And when someone comes in and says that status quo no longer serves us, the leader gets scared. And he lashes out. And the language here again, the religious leader says, you can come here any day and be healed. Because all he can see is the medical healing. That term Luke uses as a medical term. And so this religious leader is hyper-focused on just whatever that may be. And to me, that's a pretty small understanding of what Jesus is doing in this passage. The leader says, you can come and be healed. But Jesus wasn't talking about healing. Jesus was talking about setting people free. Jesus was talking about breaking chains of bondage. Jesus was talking about releasing us from whatever it is that bends us over and cripples us. But if we're honest, I think too often we are like that religious leader. We want to act like we know we're set free and we know we can stand up. But then we remember we didn't pray enough this week. Or we want to act like we remember that our chains are gone, but I'm never going to measure up. We want to act like we know we've been set free, but then we're bound by our expectations for other people. We want to know, or we want to remember and act like we know that everything that has bound us has been loosened. But then when we go about our life, we find more and more ways to tie us up, to cripple us, to bind us. Because too often we focus more on rules than we do on relationship. Too often we focus more on law than we do on love. Too often we stand up and say, it can't be that way. So maybe we need Jesus to come in here today and to see all of us, even if we feel like we can't be seen, even if we feel like no one notices us, even if we feel like we can't do enough, we can't be enough, we aren't enough. Jesus still sees us. Maybe we need Jesus to come in here and call us each to stand up and to see our people, even when we feel isolated, even when we feel alone. We can see our people. maybe we need Jesus to come in here and call us a child of God. Even when we're called so many other things by so many other people. Even when we call ourselves so many other things. Jesus still sees us. Jesus still invites us to look for our people. And Jesus still calls us his own. Amen.